What's up, everybody? Spidarian here, and welcome to another rambling about anime review thing. I don't really know exactly if I should call this a review or not because of just how rambly it gets, but we're gonna rock with it. And the anime we're talking about today is the Fruit of Grisaia. Now, if you guys just want to let's just do this real nice and quick. You guys want to just know if it's worth watching? Give it a go? Yes. I think this is a show very much worth watching. You can find it on Crunchyroll. This review is only going to be talking about Season 1. I have not watched Season 2 yet, so this is just for... We're just talking about Season 1. The context for everything in this is just going to be Season 1. So, Season 1, yeah, we're just talking about Season 1 here. So if you guys just want to know if you should watch it, yeah. So far, Season 1, I haven't watched Season 2 yet as of filming this review. I probably will make a second review once I do complete Season 2, but Season 1 was good. I really enjoyed it. It's funny, it's dark, it's sad, it's goofy. The show is so many things all at once. And I would recommend giving it a watch. Season 1 is only 13 episodes, so it's not that much of a time commitment. And again, you can find it on Crunchyroll. That's where I watched it. I don't know where else you can find it, but I found it on Crunchyroll. So if you got Crunchyroll, go ahead and give it a watch. So, yeah, long story short, yes, I recommend this anime. Give it a go. Now, from here on out, we're going to be talking a lot more about spoilers and stuff. So, let's do this. Let's get more into it. But first off, we gotta talk about the origins of this anime. So the anime actually originated as an adult visual novel by Front Wing, with character designs created by Akio Watanabe and Fumio. Again, I am not a Japanese speaker, if you guys didn't realize that already, so I apologize for any pronunciations that I have butchered. I try my best. Cut me some slack. But yeah, so it was originally an adult visual novel that released in 2011 and managed to get ported over to the PlayStation Portable and PS Vita. That's pretty cool. There were some sequels that came later on, but the anime and some manga adaptations as well. But the anime adaptation started in 2014. It was animated by 8-Bit and produced by NBC Universal. So, that's all we really need to know to cover Season 1. We don't really need to know too much more about that. So, yeah, so the show started off as an adult visual novel. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I think they meant by adult once we get to there. But first, we're going to get all the technical review stuff out of the way. So, soundtrack-wise, I don't really remember much of the soundtrack itself. The opening is pretty nice. The opening and ending themes are nice. They're not unskippable levels of nice, though. You know, like, there are some anime out there where the opening is just so damn good, you just can't skip it. For me, like, the Tokyo Ghoul Season 1 opening was so good, it's so hard to justify skipping that, because that is just such a good opening. I mean, I eventually would skip it after, like, my 7th time watching Tokyo Ghoul Season 1, but... You know, that's an example of an opening that I think is very hard to skip because it's just so good. But this show, the opening isn't so amazing that you can't skip it. It is really good though. It has a nice song, cool visuals. Same with the ending theme. Nice song, nice visuals, but not unskippable. You know, you can skip them and be fine. Animation wise, this show looks really good. I was actually really blown away with just how fluid all the animation is, because I don't really know what 8-Bit has done. I haven't really looked into them. I may have to, though. I may have to look into what their studio has created, because the show was really pretty looking. I really liked how the show looked. And this isn't a new show either. This show came out in 2014. And it looked really good. I really like how the show looks. There is never a moment where it looks bad. All the animation is really, like I said, really fluid, really solid. There are moments when they go into chibi form to kind of help bolster the comedy of some certain moments, and that form also is really, that version is also really well animated, so I really like it too. But yeah, so from a technical level, the show is really nice. It's a really nice looking show. Pretty visuals, pretty good music. Nothing, stood out to me. There was no track that really just got stuck in my head, but the music was still good. But the animation, it was really nice, really cool. And so that pretty much, I think that right there pretty much wraps up all the technical stuff we can talk about. So now let's get more into the characters and story of this anime. So from here on out, there's definitely going to be a lot more spoilers, because I'm not going to go. So the show it's very character driven, very character driven. There really isn't that much of an overarching plot. It's pretty much just our main character, Yuji Kazuma, or is it Kazumi? We're just gonna call him Yuji though. Our main character, Yuji. The show mainly revolves around him going to this new academy and interacting with all of the other students at this academy who happen to all be girls, and there's also only 5 of them, 5 other students, and they're all girls. So the show mainly revolves around him and his interactions with those female characters, and I mean there really doesn't need to be an overarching plot really, because his interactions with all the different girls is just really enjoyable. That's definitely what the show's greatest strength is. And the funniest thing about the show is that at its base surface level, it really does just look like a funny harem anime. But you quickly find out that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. And that's what I liked about this show so much. Basically, this show, like I said, the show starts off as just kind of looking like a funny harem anime with a bit of an offbeat protagonist, but all of the girls, and the main character, Yuji himself, they all have dark pasts, and they all have trauma that they are currently trying to deal with. And that trauma is, the reason for why they act the way they do. And I stabbed myself with a box cutter today, and I'm just now noticing the wound. It looks pretty bad for such a little poke. Ow. But anyways, so to get into the story now. So like I said, the main character, his name is Yuji, and right from the get-go, we're aware that he's not your average ordinary dude. He looks pretty ordinary from the outside, but you quickly realize he ain't. And basically, you find out that he's a very logical, level-headed, methodical thinking type of guy who is a little socially inept. He doesn't really have any emotions. He does, but he does not let his emotions control him in the slightest, which is honestly refreshing. I think a big thing with anime is that there's a lot of main characters are kind of fueled just by their emotions. So seeing a character, I mean, at least in a lot of the animes I've watched, the main character has been a very emotional character. I know that's not the case with all anime. Don't flame me now. I know that's not the case for all anime, but for most of the animes I've seen, it follows usually pretty emotional main characters. And it's kind of refreshing to see Yuji being pretty much the exact opposite. He's a good guy at heart, and he does have feelings and stuff, but he keeps it very buried and locked down because he realizes that he isn't able to work if he lets his emotions get the better of him. And he does once in a while kind of let his emotions get the better of him. Like, he's not a purely logical thinking person. He's not a robot. He's not Spock from Star Trek. He does, well, actually, Spock from Star Trek might actually be a pretty good comparison now that I think about it, because Spock is a very logical thinking type of person. He's a very logical thinker, but he does have emotions that he just kind of keeps buried, but are still there. And Yuji's actually very much like that. He has emotions that he just keeps buried and doesn't let control him, but he does do what he thinks is overall right, which I enjoy, because basically, Yuji is a hitman. He wants to live an average ordinary high school life, but he isn't able to do that because he is a hitman. Or at least he was, and now he does other jobs that aren't so assassin-based. And he wants to have a normal life, relatively normal life, but given his circumstances, he isn't able to, so he gets sent to a special university that only has 5 other students, who are all girls, and who all have their own reasonings for being sent to this academy, which we'll talk about when we get in depth with them. But Yuji, he's a very enjoyable protagonist. I really like him. His way, his thought process is really funny. I mean, in the very first episode, he goes to his dorm. He goes to his dorm, which is his dorms. The dorms on the campus that he goes to in the academy, they're hella nice. But he goes to his dorm, and he notices everyone's in their dorm just hanging out. And his thought process is, he thinks to himself, oh, they must all be doing homework. And then he goes, wait, there was no homework assigned today. What else could teenagers be doing in their dorms all by themselves? Masturbating. That's literally his thought process. That's a line he actually says. I obviously didn't deliver it as well as he did, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. So he has a very interesting thought process, as well as being very level-headed, never letting his emotions get the better of him. And he's just a fun character. He's a fun character to watch, because when you first meet all of the girls, who are the other, like in a sense, main characters of the show, at face value, they all just kind of fall into their typical, they just fall into different tropes. You know, you got your borderline yandere, you got your lolly, you got your tsundere. You know, they all just kind of fall into these different tropes. And you just kind of think, okay, they're just gonna act like all anime characters do. But as Yuji gets to know these girls better, and gets to interact with them more, and helps them with their problems, you find out that they are actually very deep and very well-written characters. And they, honestly, a lot of these girls feel very real in a lot of ways, which we'll talk about, because basically every single girl has some sort of traumatic, at least some kind of traumatic incident has happened in their life to cause problems today. And these problems can range from being super dark to insanely mega crazily dark. Like, none of these girls have a lighthearted past. Some girls have a past that's definitely worse than others. There's one character in particular that I'm thinking about here, and I'll definitely talk about her trauma when I get there. But they all have baggage. They all have a lot of baggage that they struggle with. And it really does help explain why they act the way they do. And I really appreciate that. It helps flesh them out and make them feel a little more realistic. Like, literally, one of the first characters we're introduced to, Michiru, and again, I apologize for any mispronunciations, but Michiru, when Yuji first encounters her, she's literally practicing how to be a tsundere in a classroom all by herself. She literally has flashcards on what to say to act more like a tsundere. And Yuji straight up calls her out on it, and she gets all flustered and embarrassed by it. But the reason why she's doing that is because she's trying to give off this persona so that she can hide the real trauma that she is dealing with. And I won't go into Michiru's backstory because I really want to focus on 2 characters' backstories. The one character, I want to focus on Amine's backstory, which is the one that I think is super dark, the darkest of all the other girls' backstories. And I want to focus on Sachi's backstory because I found myself actually being able to relate to Sachi's backstory to a certain level. And I'll talk about it more in depth when I get there, but basically all of the girls have trauma. They have something happen in their past to kind of screw them up in the future, or screw them up in the present, I should say. And Yuji is kind of here to help them get through it. Just by him being a reliable, steadfast, level-headed thinker. He's able to help these girls overcome their tragedies and trauma and become better people, ultimately. And since this is, at its core, a harem anime, they do all end up finding feelings for him one way or another. But now, before I really talk about all the characters and their trauma, I want to talk about what I think this show, what the visual novel meant by adult visual novel. And to me, at least, when I think of adult visual novel, I think of, like, sex. You know, I think of, like, porn games. I think of, you know, there's going to be, like, drinking and very lewd girls doing lewd things and whatnot. when I hear the word adult in front of anything, I just think of sexual content. But I think with the Fruits of Grisaia, what I think it really is, when they say adult visual novel, is yes, there is a lot of sexual content in this anime. And I'll talk about that right after I'm done talking about this, because the sexual points, my opinion on this show may seem very hypocritical compared to what my opinion was on Fire Force and its sexual content. But I'll talk about that when I get there, which will be right after this, so stick around. But with the term adult visual novel, I typically think of sexual content. But in this show, this visual novel definitely has sexual content. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. They really encompass everything about the adult tag, not just the, oh, there's going to be some sexy stuff. Because all of these girls have such dark pasts, and the show is littered with the themes of depression, suicide, self-loathing, survivor's guilt, just guilt in general. All of the girls have very real traumas that aren't too unrealistic from what an ordinary person could encounter, you know? It's not some typical anime, my entire family and village was slaughtered by this bad guy, and now I'm now evil because I need to get revenge. Like, no. The majority of the things that happen to these girls is fairly realistic, and you could see it actually happening to you. Now, some of the girls, they come from, like, really rich families, and that's part of the reason why they have some of their trauma, such as Yumiko and Makina. They both come from rich, powerful families, so that one doesn't quite work, because the average ordinary person isn't rich. But the direct trauma that, especially Yumiko, not so much Makina. Makina's trauma comes from a very specific issue related to her family situation. But Yumiko, she deals with self-hate because of the fact that she's a girl, and that her being a girl caused a lot of problems for her and her mother growing up. So she deals with self-hate and kind of an identity crisis of who she is and what she wants to be and how much value does she actually have. She deals with those issues. And I feel like that's something that maybe the way she got to having those issues isn't necessarily relatable. But I think everyone at some point in their life has probably hated themselves for one reason or another. I know I do. So these characters all have relatively relatable backstories, or at least relatable issues. And like I said, it's not some ridiculous anime thing of, you know, my whole family was slaughtered by so-and-so and now I need revenge, but I need to do dark things to get this revenge. Like, no. They deal with everyday problems and real trauma, and that's what I think really helps flesh these girls out as realistic characters. Honestly, Yuji, our main character, is the most unrealistic character in this entire show, to be honest. So, yeah, it's really quite something. I really enjoyed that. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about this show, was the characters and how real their trauma really seemed to be. It really helped flesh them out and make them feel like I said, real characters, which made them just that much more relatable and enjoyable to watch. Especially as Yuji helps them deal with their problems. And the next aspect of the show I want to talk to before we kind of go and talk about some of the characters that I want to go more in depth on is the fan service in this show. Now, this show does have a fair amount of fan service. There's quite a few panty shots, and the character Amine is a just overtly sexual character towards Yuji. And she has a reasoning for it, which I will discuss, because she's one of the characters I wish to talk about. But there's quite a few panty shots, and most of the time it really feels out of place. And when I first, in the first few episodes when I was watching and I saw these panty shots, I rolled my eyes and went, oh dear, it's going to be another one of these shows, because one of my biggest issues with Fire Force that I mentioned in my Fire Force anime review is the fact that the fan service in that show really feels like it does not belong and kind of ruins the show in some ways. It at least ruins some of the characters, such as Tamaki. Tamaki's whole point of being in Fire Force seems to just be the Tolkien fan service girl. I mean, her firepower literally gives her, like, cat ears and a tail, so, like, come on now. And she always wears, like, black underwear or whatever, or black bikini. and barely anything else, and she always falls out of her clothes. And it just doesn't really, like, her character just seems like she exists just to do that. And I find that to be disappointing. I like shows with really strong characters, and that was one of my biggest issues with Fire Force, is that the characters felt relatively weak, and a large part of it was due to that a lot of the characters felt like they existed just to be fan service characters, which disappointed me. But with this show, when I first saw that there was quite a few panty shots, I was kind of like, oh dear, here we go again. But I ended up not really being bothered by it. I ended up I guess you could say, I ended up barely even noticing the panty shots by the end of the show. Like, I was still acknowledged that they were there, but it didn't bother me at all. Didn't get me hot and horny, nor did it make me groan and roll my eyes. And I think one reason for that is the fact that none of the characters really acknowledge the panty shots. You know, like in most harem animes, or just anime in general, when you see a panty shot, if another character sees it, they're going to react and blush and do weird things. But that's totally out of Yuji's character here. And most of the other girls don't even acknowledge it. There's like one instance where a girl's panties get revealed, and a character openly reacts to it. And then her reaction is quickly shut down by that said character. So, I think with just how the characters never really acknowledge any of the fan service kind of helps me get past it. As well as, once you learn about all these girls' backstory, and the trauma that they're dealing with, that helps them just feel, like I said, a lot more real, which makes them feel more like genuine, fully fleshed out characters, not just objects to be ogled, you know? Not that I'm trying to be all SJW or whatever, but, you know, like I said in my Fire Force review, I'm not a big fan of fan service in anime, because, I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I like my food to be separate. If I'm hot and horny and want to jerk off, I'll go watch porn. If I want to watch anime, I'll watch anime. You know, like, I don't really like there being fan service in anime unless it has a reason. And in the Fruits of Grisha, or the Fruit of Grisaia, pardon me, you could make the argument that there's something you could see in the panty shot resembles vulnerability or whatever. I'm sure there's some artsy-fartsy meaning you could find out of it, but for the most part, I feel like it is there just to be there, because this is an adult visual novel, so there is sexual content. But, just given how these characters act around each other and just act in general, it really doesn't feel like the fan service really did become not that noticeable, and I appreciated that. The characters felt like they were there more than just to be something to be, you know, eye candy. They actually felt like real characters. And that's what I liked about the show so much, and why I was able to put aside the fact that there are quite a few panty shots. The only thing that kind of got me and made me go, okay, what the fuck, was that someone in the line of producing the Fruits of Grisaia, whether it be the novelist or the anime person, but someone somewhere in making the Fruit of Grisaia has a piss fetish, because I think all of the girls wet themselves at least once in this show. And I don't know why. Because in my opinion, piss is kind of gross. It usually doesn't smell good because no one drinks enough water, especially in the summer. And it just always felt really weird when it would happen. But all of the girls, I'm fairly certain all of the girls pissed themselves at least once in the show. And I don't know if that happens in the visual novel. I'm assuming it does. But yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that made me roll my eyes and go, okay, this is weird. I mean, there were some other moments, some borderline Monogatari, or some borderline Nisi Monogatari toothbrush scene levels of kind of weird and uncomfortable. But I'm just going to leave that for you guys, because I don't want to spoil, like, yes, there are spoilers in this review, but I don't want to spoil everything. I want to go in depth with only two of the real characters and their backstories. And everything else, I just kind of want to let you guys figure out. So, like I said, give this a watch. Give this show a watch. I recommend it. But, yeah, the fan service didn't really bug me because A, none of the characters really acknowledge it that much, and B, all of the characters are actually really well written and designed, so I'm able to overlook some sexualization of them because they are just all really strong, good characters. But now let's move on to some of the characters that I want to talk about. So the main cast of characters is Yuji, our protagonist, Yumiko, Amine, Michiru, Makina, Sachi, Chizuru, who is the principal / teacher of the academy, and JB, whose name is Julia, and she is Yuji's boss. She is the one who kind of sets targets for him to deal with, more or less. And she's a cool character all on her own, but I think she'll be developed a lot more in Season 2. Season 2 looks like there actually is going to be more of an overarching plot, and maybe some more development for Yuji as a character versus just the girls. But we'll have to see what happens. Because again, as of this review, I have not watched Season 2 yet. I am only covering Season 1. So, those are the main cast of characters that we will be seeing. And the first character that I want to talk about a little more in-depth, because like I said, I'm not going to talk about every girl and their backstory in-depth in this, because A, that would be way too long, because all of them have pretty long stories. And B, like I said, I say that a lot, now that I think about it. Like I said. But anyways, I want you guys to, watch the show and, get the stories for yourselves. But the two characters that really stuck out to me, their backstories really stuck out to me, was Sachi and Amine. Now, Sachi, I'll talk about her first, because her backstory isn't as in-depth as Amine's, because Amine, most of the girls get about 2 to 3 episodes. Their arc is about 2 to 3 episodes of Yuji helping them out, and you learn about their past trauma, and Yuji helps them move on from it, or at least begin the healing process to move on from it. Sachi has probably one of the shortest, while Amine, I think, has the longest. Sachi's backstory is actually pretty short, but hers was relatable to me on a certain level. So, that's why I wanted to talk about it. So Sachi's character, I really like her design. I'm not into maids, but she kind of has a maid thing going on, which is a little weird, but her backstory kind of explains it. But essentially, she literally dresses as a maid, and if you tell her to do something, she will do everything in her power to make sure that it gets done. She just wants to be a very reliable, unselfish person, and she likes to do things for others. And her arc involves Michiru telling Sachi to get rid of the exam. I don't want to take this test. Get rid of the exam. And Sachi's way of going about that is to bomb the school. She literally makes homemade bombs using propane tanks and stuff, and high-quality detonators, and literally rigs the school to explode. But fortunately, Yuji was onto her because, well, he's received very special training and is basically OP. He disables the bombs, but, makes Sachi still believe that they're gonna go off, and Sachi thinks all the girls walk in as Sachi's about to blow up a bomb, and Sachi thinks that they're gonna die, and yada yada yada. Long story short, she pees herself, and then Yuji comes in and is like, hey, we good. And that's when we learn about Sachi's backstory, which is, when Sachi was growing up, she had very negligent parents, but not negligent on purpose. Her parents were just very busy with their jobs, trying to provide for her and just the family in general. But this left Sachi feeling very sad and feeling alone, and it turns out her and Yuji actually knew each other as kids. Yuji just kind of forgot about her due to, I'm assuming, the hardcore training he went through while he grew up to become the man he is today. He ended up kind of forgetting a lot of stuff from his past, and unfortunately Sachi was one of them. She calls him Yukun, which is really cute. But so Yuji and Sachi would hang out at the park together, and then one day Sachi, it's her birthday. Her parents took the day off of work to hang out with her and, say that they love her. But Sachi gets mad because she misses that she doesn't have her parents around to play with her. So she gets mad and storms off. And it's just like, you guys shouldn't have taken the day off of work. Like, you guys clearly don't love me. I'm out of here. And then she feels bad about it because she's not a bitch, she's a good person. So she feels regret for being so mean to her parents. And she understands that they're trying their best and that they're just busy, that they do love her. And her parents are looking for her at the park. They find her. They go running towards each other, and then both of Sachi's parents get run over by a truck right in front of her eyes. Her dad's dead immediately, her mom's put into critical condition and slips into a coma. And Sachi basically has to spend the rest of her life alone. And the reason why she developed her maid personality, you could say, is that she viewed it as her fault, because she was selfish. She viewed it as it was her fault for why her parents ended up the way they did, with one being dead, one being severely hospitalized. So she vowed to herself to never ever be selfish again, and to do basically everything for others. Never do anything for herself, do everything for others as a way of atonement for her past mistakes. And I'm able to relate to this on a certain level because I kind of had negligent parents myself growing up. And it was basically the exact same way Sachi's were, where they weren't negligent because, they didn't like me, or more like they didn't love me or anything. They were busy with work because bills need to get paid, It's not cheap having a family. But I grew up feeling pretty alone, and I'm a very independent person nowadays because of that. So I was able to kind of relate to Sachi in the way she felt, with just feeling a bit neglected. And I'm not trying to turn you guys into my therapist here, but that's the main reason why Sachi's story stuck out to me so much, is because I was able to relate to that feeling of having negligent parents, but not because they didn't love me, but because they did love me and they wanted to work hard so that I could have a good, comfortable life, just like Sachi's parents. Now, fortunately, my parents never got run over by a car. They both are still alive and well as of this recording, and I hope they will stay alive and well for a good long time after this recording too. But her story, it's a very tragic one, but compared to some of the other characters, it actually is kind of tame compared to some of the other characters, especially Amine, who we'll talk about. But her story just stuck out to me because I was able to see where she was coming from, and I was able to relate to her plight. Like I said, fortunately my parents were never run over by a truck in front of my eyes, but I was able to relate to her, and it made her character, I was able to form a little bit of a connection to her character more than some of the other girls. I love all of the characters in this show. All of the main girls in Yuji. I love them all. They're all great, fun characters to watch. Very entertaining. And Sachi she's one as well. But yeah, I was able to relate to her. And I think that's something that I really liked about the show, is that a lot of the girls, either their circumstances that led them to where they are, or at least where they are now, emotionally and mentally, I think everyone is able to relate to, or has been able to relate to, at least at some point in their life. Now, given that my parents never underwent any sort of tragedy due to me being selfish, I don't quite have Sachi's intense, I need to do everything for others, even if it means blowing up my school. But there was another circumstance in my life where I was selfish once, and someone else essentially ended up getting hurt for it. And I try to be a very unselfish person. Probably I take it a little too far sometimes. So I'm really able to relate to Sachi as a character, and her story, and how she is now. And that made me really like her. That really endeared me to her character. And all of the characters have elements about them that are very relatable and very enjoyable to watch. Not enjoyable to watch them suffering, but enjoyable to watch them dealing with the trauma and overcoming it. Finding inner strength to persevere. So I really like Sachi and her story because I was able to relate to it. But the other character I want to talk about, thank God I'm not able to relate to her. Or at least her backstory. But the character I want to talk about now is Amine. And I'm not going to go super in-depth with her backstory, because there is just so much to digest. I'll do my best to explain it, but there's so much in there that I think you can really only get the full emotional weight of it by watching the show, or at least playing the visual novel. But Amine, her backstory is, because from the get-go, Amine, at first glance, she just kind of seems like, oh, she's just kind of the horny girl. She's just into Yuji because he's cute. But you kind of let into a little hint, because in the first or second episode, you see she exits, she's talking to Yuji and she exits his dorm room, and as she's leaving, she closes the door and she says quietly to herself, "I found him." And that right there kind of leads you to go, okay, something's up. What's going on here? But that's kind of tabled. Her backstory and whatnot is shelved for the time being, until we finally get to her arc, which happens at the very end of the season. It's the last, I think, 4 episodes are Amine's arc. And I forget what the arc is called. It's called, like, Hollowed Angels or Hollowed Wings or something along that line. I can't remember exactly what it was. I'll probably make a text about it, what it actually was called. But basically, her story, as she confesses it to Yuji, is when she was younger, she got into an accident. She was on a school trip with a bunch of other girls at her academy, and they all got into a nasty accident and got stranded in the middle of the woods with no chance of help coming to them. And on this school trip, we find out that Yuji has an older sister named, what was her name again? Hold on a second, it's coming to me. Kazuki? Is that it? Yeah, Kazuki. Kazuki Kazima, or Kazimi. I forgot Yuji's last name now. It's early in the morning, my brain's beginning to sputter out on me. So please bear with me as I fight through. Okay, let's go. So, Amine and Kazuki, Yuji's older sister, who is believed to be dead at the time of the show, they meet each other in this survival event because they're in the same class, but they never really talked to each other until now. And basically, all these girls and their teacher are now stranded in the middle of the woods with very limited resources and their supplies dwindling fast. The teacher leaves to try to go find help, but ends up coming back after a few days, half-starved and crazy. And all the girls are it's basically just a very graphic, dark tale of trying to survive. And, I mean, there is just way too much that happens for me to go fully in depth on everything that goes on during this trip. But let's just say, because there's so much emotional weight in what's going on, because one thing about the show is that it's very good at getting you attached to characters pretty early. So, like, Amine survives because her whole thing is that she's dealing with survivor's guilt because she is the only girl that survives this ordeal. The only one who survives. And it was because of the sacrifice of others, in particular, Yuji's sister Kazuki, that she was able to survive. But it's a very dark story of these girls trying to survive as hard as they can, and they resort to doing some unspeakable things to survive, which basically includes eating the corpse of deceased classmates to try to get by. But Kazuki and Amine don't. They don't eat their classmates, and they end up trying to escape because they find out, like, the class rep and the teacher are having sex with one another, and they're chopping up all the dead bodies of the girls that are slowly passing out and dying to make them into food. And I'm not a guy who gets queasy or gets really unsettled by things because I have a pretty strong grasp on reality, at least I think. So I'm able to, distance myself emotionally from when I see, fucked up stuff happening on TV shows or in anime. But with how this was presented and how it was written, this was hard to watch. And it's not excessively graphic. Like, you don't see like the dissection of the bodies or anything, but it's still really graphic. And all of the girls, like, you don't really get attached to too many of the external schoolmates. You really only care about Amine and Kazuki. But still, seeing just all these, like, innocent characters slowly get more and more perverted in a sense, by the harsh reality that they're trapped in. And not perverted in the way that they're sneaking peeks at each other, more perverted in the way of they're literally engaging in cannibalism. It was really hard. It was hard to watch. And I mean, I didn't really like cringe away or vomit or anything. It was just I felt very unsettled, and I felt very sad. Like, it made me very sad. It was so dark. I was just getting sad. But it was really good. The way Amine's arc was presented was really good. And it ultimately ends with Kazuki seemingly sacrificing herself so that Amine can escape the girls who are trying to hunt them down to eat them. And Amine ends up surviving, and she spends the rest of her life just stuck with survivor's guilt. And because, you know, everyone's making up rumors about her, about how she survived, and she just views as though she thinks to herself that she is not the one who should have survived. And the reason why she was searching for Yuji was because Kazuki, she's a great character. I really liked her because she's a lot like Yuji. Very logical, very level-headed, doesn't let her emotions get the better of her. She's a great character, and you can see the relation between Yuji and Kazuki. They definitely seem like brother and sister. You know, level-headedness seems to run in the family. And Kazuki, she can kind of come off as cold because of how level-headed she can be and how unemotional she can seemingly be. And she does take care of the injured girls, because there are some girls who gets like, one girl gets like her stomach slashed open because of the accident, another one gets like her knees shattered, and those girls slowly dying was hard to watch because of how painful it seemed to be. But so Kazuki, she kind of comes off as cold, but she gets close. Her and Amine get really close, and she tells Amine that, you know, Kazuki tells Amine that one of the things she values most in this world is her brother, her younger brother Yuji. She really loves Yuji, and, you know, wants to see him again, and wants to introduce Amine to him. And wants to introduce Amine to him. And with Amine, you know, seeing Kazuki sacrifice herself, she wanted to find Yuji so that Yuji could punish her for taking away, you know, his sister, his beloved sister. And she even tells Kazuki to kill her, which he doesn't. You know, he smacks her on the head and is like, "Idiot, I'm not gonna kill you. You're gonna stay by my side and live, and that'll be your punishment." Which is really more of a mercy, because in a sense he's kind of absolving her of her guilt that she feels. And she'll never be truly over the trauma of the incident, because the incident itself was just so horrible. But maybe now she can at least start to forgive herself for surviving. And then her arc ends with a distraught parent of one of the girls that died taking Amine and all the other girls hostage at the school with a shotgun. And then Yuji snaps them through a tiny window while he was taking a piss. And that's how they win the day. So this show, that's one of the things I love about the show. It has very well written characters. But the show is also totally unafraid to just go crazy, to just become ridiculous and over the top. And the show feels like it's all over the place, and with its themes and tones, but in a good way. You know, like, it can be just standard harem anime, and then it gets super crazy and like JoJo levels of bizarre and ridiculous, to then really sad and somber, to back to just being like a typical anime harem. It's all over the place, but in the best way possible. And it was really just a really entertaining watch. The characters are all really strong. The designs are all really cute and distinct. Yuji is great. His thought process is so funny. And we're left off with the mystery of this mysterious bad guy seems to show up at the end of the first season, who's going to be causing some problems, it seems. And then there's also the question of, is Yuji's sister still alive somewhere? And can we find her and save her if she is? So, I'm excited for Season 2. I will be watching Season 2 pretty shortly after this goes up, I think. And I'll make another rambling review about it, because I'm pretty sure there's only one other season. I'm not sure. And I mean, I'm very tempted to jump into the visual novels, because I mean, the anime is only 13 episodes long, so there's only so much they can do. There's only so much of the visual novel that they can actually contain within the anime itself. And if I read the comments on a lot of the videos correctly, it seems like the anime likes to combine some of their endings, some of the different routes that you can get with the characters into one ending to make it a little more cohesive. So, if you like the visual novel, you're still getting a somewhat unique experience by watching the anime, and vice versa. But the visual novel definitely will go a lot more in depth with the characters and their backstories and whatnot. But yeah, the anime itself, especially for only being 13 episodes, it felt good. The pacing didn't feel rushed because, like I said, there really wasn't any overarching plot in this first season. It really was just getting introduced to these characters, learning about them, figuring out their backstory, and them falling in love with Yuji because of how he's the best guy ever and is able to help them out. Although some of the ways he helps these girls out and helps them confront their trauma is a little extreme. You'll see what I mean if you give it a watch. That's one way that he handles Michiru. The way that he handles Michiru's problem is definitely one that I want you guys to experience for yourself, because it was probably the funniest out of them all, as well as one of the most screwed up. But you'll get there. But yeah, so in general, the show very well animated, great characters. Yuji is fun to watch. All of the girls are very well designed, deep characters. The fans, because of that fact, the fan service ends up just kind of not really being a problem, not really being prevalent at all. Like, you'll notice it, but it's kind of like it's like when you're driving. Like, you acknowledge, like, the trash on the side of the road. Like, you notice it, but it doesn't really... You notice it, but the thought doesn't really pass through your mind that, like, oh, hey, there was, like, a tire on the side of the road. Or that there was, you know, someone's Big Mac on the side of the road. Or, like, you see a sign that you've passed by 100 times. You acknowledge the sign. Like, your mind registers, okay, I'm looking at a sign. But your brain doesn't really make a conscious thought about it. And that's kind of what the panties in this show become. Like, your brain makes a conscious, like, your brain notes it, but you don't really have a conscious thought about it once you get towards the end of the show where all of the characters have been really fleshed out. And yeah, overall the show was great. I really liked it. I hope season 2 is just as strong as season 1. We'll see what happens now that there seems to be an actual plot, an overarching plot now. We'll see what happens. And yeah, the show is great. It has some genuinely funny moments that can make you laugh out loud. It has some genuinely sad moments that will make you just sit in silence. I mean, I'm not a crier, but maybe you'll cry. I don't know. There's one really sad scene that I got a little, not teary-eyed, but I could feel my eyes piling up sandbags. Wait, that's a term for peeing. Never mind, my eyes were not piling up sandbags. But yeah, so overall, the show was really good. Season 1 was really good. I really enjoyed it. I think I found the show through a YouTube recommended, like Fruit of Grisaia funny moments compilation. Just Yuji being Yuji, dealing with the girls. And they got me interested enough to actually want to give the show a watch. And I finally am watching it, and I'm really enjoying it. So I highly recommend giving it a watch. The characters are really great. And, you know, like I said, I said it again. As I said, all of the girls have very deep backstories. And they're all very well-designed, fleshed-out characters. I'm sure they're even better in the visual novel, where we get even more time to interact with these characters. And especially for only being 13 episodes long, it's a pretty easy time commitment. I highly recommend giving it a watch. I really enjoyed it. And I have high hopes of season 2. And I may have to pick up the visual novel myself to just get even more content, just to get more of these characters. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I just really, really liked this anime. It was really good, really enjoyable. And I think you guys will like it too. If you like fan service, hey, there's fan service, so that's something for you. If you don't like fan service, hey, it's not that noticeable, so that's something for you. If you like shows with funny moments, a ridiculous main character, and really deep, well-designed supporting cast, supporting characters, then this is the show for you. Give it a try. And at that note, my batteries are spent. My eyes are getting heavy. My lips are refusing to work. My tongue's getting all fat in my mouth. I might just be having an allergic reaction to something and I might be dying. But that's not going to stop me from finishing off this episode. So, highly recommend Fruit of Grisaia. You can find it on Crunchyroll. I've only watched season 1 so far, but I have high hopes that season 2 will be good as well. Oh, if not as good, at least fun to watch. I think no matter what, this show will be a fun watch. And yeah, I really liked it. So give it a try. If you guys made it this far, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for sticking with me throughout this anime review. This is a little director's note here. This is actually my 3rd take recording. The first take, I covered every single girl in the backstory, and that was just way too long and boring. In the second episode, I just wasn't quite happy with how I structured everything. Because the reason I call this rambling about is because I don't have a script. I'm just talking out of my ass here. I'm talking off the top of my hat. So I don't have a script to guide me along, or to organize my thoughts. Which is why, especially towards the end of these videos, I really start slurring. I start acting a bit like a drunkard. Because I start getting tired. Because for whatever reason, I can't do an anime review in the middle of the day. I always have to do it at least 1 in the morning. And it is now almost 2 in the morning. So I better shut this off quick before I crash. So if you guys made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give Fruit of Grisaia a watch. It's on Crunchyroll. I don't know where else it is, but give it a watch. I don't know if there's a dub. I watch sub. I'm a sub guy. All my reviews are 9 times out of 10 going to be about the sub of the show. I don't even really care if there is a dub because I don't like dub very much. But yeah, give the show a watch. I highly recommend it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of whatever I make. Bye-bye.